officially going live. That was our preview.
Okay.
That was our warm-up.
All right.
Thank you so much.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Oh.
Computer's doing.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Galt Museum and Archives' latest and greatest event on Facebook. I am Darrin Martens, the CEO and Executive Director of the Galt Museum and Archives, and it is my distinct pleasure to welcome Kirstan Schamuhn, who is the guest curator of our latest special exhibition, which is called Pockets of Possibility. So welcome, Kirstan.
Hi, thanks for having me. Very happy to be here.
Excellent. So with respect to the exhibition, Pockets of Possibilities, when we think about pockets, they're usually places that we keep treasures or private, intimate things. And then you've combined that with the idea of possibilities. And I think that is an interesting combination. So I'm wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about why you chose pockets as an exhibition topic.
Right. Well, I've always been very interested in topics of gender and equality, and this was a topic that had come up at an exhibition meeting last year. We had a group together for the staff of the Galt, and we're chatting a little bit about possible exhibitions. And I got very interested when they brought up the idea of pockets, because pockets seem quite small and innocuous at the outset. We don't think about pockets very much.
Right.
But diving into the history of pockets a little bit more, you start to uncover that there are topics of gender and inequality with regards to pockets, especially in fashions marketed towards women. And that really drew me in, and even doing my undergraduate, I was very interested in these topics of gender, and it just seemed like something that I could really dive into and enjoy researching more.
Right, and I think that I know as a man, that is something that I have never thought about. Knowing that within, whether it is jackets, whether shirts, whether pants, there are always pockets in men's fashions. So why did you choose to focus on pockets that were designed and included and excluded things in fashion that was marketed to women?
Right, so as I mentioned, I was interested in topics of gender and equality, and being an individual who does wear a lot of clothing that is marketed to women, I wear women's fashions, it was something that I as well had never really thought of. It became the norm that I would select a pair of jeans or a jacket, and half of the pockets on them would just be not functional at all. And that was the way that it was. And I started building on the exhibition and focusing in on women's fashions, because that seemed to be where more of the history lies and more of the issues lie with pockets, is that women have historically not had access in the last 100 years to pockets at the same level that men's fashions have.
Right, okay. No, I think that is quite fascinating. And I guess one of the things I'd be curious to know a little bit more about is what were some of the interesting and maybe esoteric aspects of the idea of pockets that you discovered as you were researching this topic?
There were actually 2 points that I found to be exceptionally interesting as I was researching, and the first one being that pockets in women's fashions weren't always the way that they are now. So there was a time when there were greatly functional pockets that women had access to, and they were on par with what is included in men's fashions, and at the time were even larger than what we think of pockets of as today. So they used to be little pouches that were worn around the waist or under the petticoats, and they were quite large as pockets. They could be quite deep. There are tales, and even in popular culture and literature of the 19th century and the 18th century, you could see that they were sharing stories of pockets that you could fit bottles in, or you could fit boxes of chocolates in, and children's toys and more into.
Okay.
And I was really interested in the fact that we started with those. How did we end up here to where pockets are 50% of them aren't functional in women's fashions.
Or non-existent.
Or non-existent as well, yeah.
As well. And I think that is, and I guess what, from your estimation, would you attribute that to sort of at a high level?
At a high level, I would attribute it to mostly the changing ideals of fashions of the time. So we really start to see pockets begin to disappear as fashion started to slim down and the silhouette started to slim, even beginning with the early 1800s. That is when pockets really started to disappear from women's fashions, and that was maintained over the course of the years. Pockets were swapped out for purses or these little reticules that could be very elaborately decorated. And in the end, it did happen that the fashion industry could make more money off of being able to sell purses and handbags, as well as the regular clothing that you could wear. So at a high level, there is that function of money being involved.
So do you see that there was an evolution then, or a de-evolution of the pocket leading all the way up through the 21st century?
Exactly. There was a de-evolution, and there were certain periods in history where pockets seemed to make a bit of a revival, even in the early 20th century, which the exhibit focuses on. In about the 1920s and the 1930s, there was a reinvigoration of pockets in women's fashions, and you could see that in women beginning to wear more trousers, even outside the home or in the domestic sphere. They were starting to wear pants, and those often had very deep pockets to them. And then we see it switch back and de-evolve again to the point where pockets were disappearing.
So this is a large topic, and I suspect that as you were researching, you were learning more and more about the history and the evolution. But you've chosen to really focus on the 20th century of pockets. And why did you choose to focus solely on the 20th century, given that there was so much change sort of before?
Right, so the 20th century was one that I picked first and foremost, given the parameters of the collection here at the Galt Museum. I was quite intimately familiar with the collection going into this, and I knew that there's not a whole lot prior to the 20th century in the collection, especially for fashions. So part of it was just from how functional the exhibit could be on the collection scale. And the other part of it was that I was really interested in the 20th century. When I started doing the research and finding information about pockets, a lot of it did focus on that 19th and 18th century pocket history. And the 20th century was just such a time of rapid social change and changing norms and changing roles for women, changing gender roles. And I was really interested in how pockets may have impacted those roles or may have impacted how women interacted with the world around them in those changing times.
Right. Okay, that's great. So I guess to further to that point, sort of when researching the evolution of pockets in the 20th century, what social and or political histories about the time period, about pockets and fashion, that really surprised you?
One of them was certainly how pockets engaged with the goals and the ideals of the suffragette movement, and especially part of the Rational Dress Society. So the Rational Dress Society was founded in 1881 in England. It was something that was incorporated into the suffragette movement of the 20th century and late 19th century. And their goals were to focus on changing women's fashions from being potentially harmful or causing injury or even impeding women's movements throughout the day. So eliminating corsets and eliminating other restrictive garments. And part of it was that they started to address the fact that they didn't have access to pockets. And pockets would greatly provide some better access for women to move freely in society or outside of the home without the anxiety of having a purse snatched on the street or leaving a purse behind somewhere. And they started to really focus in and advocate for pockets. And as included in the exhibition, there's an article from the New York Times that I found very interesting. And it was a fundraiser for the suffragette movement in the United States that included stuffing donations into a mannequin that was dressed in a garment that had 100 pockets on it.
Right.
To make the point that women needed access to pockets to have some
So would you characterize pockets sort of through, the early part of the 20th century and even up through today as a subtle way of protesting?
Oh, absolutely. So at a time, pockets were considered to be not needed in women's fashions, and people have written on the topic and have started to explore it a bit more, is that pockets at some stage were started to be viewed as not necessary for women's fashions through the 19th and the 18th centuries because women weren't seen as needing to carry property or money around with them. That was the domain of their fathers or their husbands, the men in their lives. Right. And that was part of what led to pockets being erased from women's fashions. And so I think that there is some form of protest to that, to continuing to wear the pockets and continuing to have pockets and have pockets custom made for your dresses, or to have pockets custom made for your outfits, or to be altered in your clothing to really protest that you are a person and have access to what you need during the day.
It's something that I spoke about earlier, is I never really contemplated on how gendered that pockets really have been, and the struggle that women and women's fashions have had to go through just to maintain that sort of sense of pocket equality. And while it might sound a bit strange, it really is, I think, something as men we take for granted, whereas this has been sort of an ongoing issue for women, not only for comfort, but also for convenience as well. So I guess one of the questions I have for you is, so during the exhibition planning process, how did the Galt's collection inform your understanding about pockets that were in fashion and specifically marketed towards women?
So the Galt had primarily, as I mentioned already, collections from the 20th century onwards, very little before that. So really going into the collection and looking at the pieces, it was difficult to find any pieces that had functional pockets in them. I can't tell you how many times I went into the collection thinking, I've got one today, I found a piece, and then just take a look at the pocket and it's sewn shut. It's a faux pocket, or the pocket is this big on a dress, and just
not really useful for anything.
Right,
practical.
You can't fit anything into that, something that small. And it was just this sense of heavy disappointment when I found those, thinking still, as women do when we go shopping, or when anyone goes shopping for women's fashions, I found a garment that has pockets, this dress has pockets, and not being able to find that really started me thinking that at least here in Lethbridge, or what we have donated to the collection here, pockets were a rare commodity in the early 20th century.
Right.
And
I don't know if you can answer this, but would you see that there was also a correlation to different classes of potentially women, if there was high society versus working class, or did you notice?
I certainly think that there is an element of that to it. Certainly when it comes to the 1800s and pockets being worn out externally on the body, pockets were often elaborately decorated. If you were a member of the high class elite, you were able to afford to have custom made pockets to match your dress, so you could have the same pattern done for them. In terms of the 20th century collections here, I was quite surprised by some of the pieces that I found and even included, thinking that there might be a difference between garments that were handmade versus specifically tailored, or more of those elite formal dresses, and there really wasn't. Even in the dresses that were homemade, we still see a lack of pockets on those dresses. In the dresses that are more formal, we see decoration prioritized over the pockets and over their functionality. So I think in the collection here, that's not very well represented, but I think that overall there is certainly an element of class to the pocket struggles.
Well, and I think, in looking at the exhibition and the objects that you've chosen to represent your curatorial thesis, there's a lot of focus on dresses as opposed to pants or anything else. And do you see that there, in your research, was there a bit of a change, or is dresses still very much a women's domain?
I didn't see too much of a change. I would have loved to have found some pants to use. Unfortunately, the Galt's collections didn't include any pants at all that were marketed towards or worn by women or known to have been worn by women.
Right.
So it was a bit challenging because certainly during the 1920s and 30s, as women were wearing pants and it was becoming normalized more, there certainly were pockets in those, and there was better access to pockets. So you see celebrities of the era wearing these pants and having their hands in their pockets, and it certainly would have aided women who were working in the home or working outside of the home wearing those garments. But in terms of dresses, there was a level of some fields having that functionality. Nurses, for instance, and the uniform included, they did have functional pockets in there. But aside from that, dresses were the primary focus simply because that's what we had access to.
Right. Yeah. No, and that makes perfect sense. And I guess in looking at the works that you've chosen for the exhibition, I wonder if you could talk a little bit, or if you uncovered anything about were there changes in fabrics and the use of fabrics in making some of these garments, or whether it was dresses.
Absolutely. So a lot of dresses, especially from the 1920s and that flapper era, certainly were made from more delicate textiles and fabrics. We do have one on display that is quite a delicate fabric. I believe that it is a silk fabric, but don't quote me on that. There was a change to a certain extent. We start to see dresses becoming made of more sturdy fabrics later on in the 20s into the 30s, and there are other garments that I did not include in the exhibit that were a little bit sturdier in terms of fabrics. You see wool dresses, and for the objects that were selected that did have pockets to them, you can see that the textile that they used was certainly playing a part in whether they could include a pocket into that garment. The sturdier fabrics, the wool overcoats, they could have that afforded pocket. The garment would be able to hold that. A silk dress, though, pockets start to get a bit dicey.
Absolutely. No, I could definitely see that for sure. I guess, so what was your biggest surprise in this research and going through the collections here at the Galt? What surprised you the most out of your research?
There were certainly a couple moments that I was quite surprised. One of them being, even with that black dress on display with the triangular pockets on the front, was the amount of faux pockets or fake pockets that were included on garments even back that early. So the faux pocket has been making a revival lately in fashions, not only for women's fashions, but for men's fashions as well. And I was quite surprised to find that that was a struggle even in the early 20th century, that you could be shocked to find your pocket doesn't quite work here. I was also very surprised at just how political pockets could get. For instance, with the Rational Dress Society. I went into it thinking that pockets were innocuous. Pockets would be an interesting topic, but probably wouldn't delve too deeply into a single political movement. But in fact, they did inform a lot of politics of the day.
I guess your exhibition focuses a lot on Western wear, Western pockets. And one of the things I noticed in the exhibition is that you have a Blackfoot pouch. And how does that fit into the exhibition?
I was quite interested in Blackfoot perspectives on pockets as well. If pockets were included in Blackfoot clothing, or could be included broader in Indigenous clothing. And I was very fortunate enough to be able to chat with Rebecca Wild and with Blanche Brucehead here, and be able to chat with her a little bit more about Blackfoot perspectives. And their perspectives were that pockets weren't something that were included in their clothing normally, because what they carry—
Male and female,
Male
correct?
and female, yes.
Right.
Mostly because what they could carry was often contained in special pouches that they made for travel and made for the convenience of travel, because migration was such a huge part of their lives. And that was something that was very interesting to me, and I was very excited to be able to have those perspectives included and to be able to
Right.
include those 2 bags, not from the Galt Museum, but on loan
Right.
from the Esplanade Museum in Medicine Hat.
Great, excellent. So I just have one more question for you. So how has the exhibition impacted your own awareness and understanding of pockets?
So I certainly was always aware of pockets or clothing without pockets to them, and I think that now it's just become even more of an awareness as I go.
Okay. We have a question that has come in from Facebook. So out of all the pockets that you found, which one or garment would you most want for yourself?
Oh, goodness. Well, there's a lovely suit that's on display now. The only piece of clothing that I included that was a male marketed item, and it's 2 pieces to a 3-piece suit. It's the vest and the jacket, and I would very much want those. They have far more pockets on them than I could dream of. There's at least 3 on the jacket and at least 2 on the vest, so that would be my personal pick.
That's your personal pick?
Yes.
Excellent. That's great. So I guess, is there anything else that at this moment that you would like our audience to know about the exhibition and about what you discovered?
Certainly, I think that pockets are a very interesting topic, especially for many women. It's something that you go to the store and you find something with pockets in it and you get very excited. Keep that excitement going, and it's really an interesting topic to delve into for personal research. There's a lot of really great articles online. There was a recent study that was done that went in depth about that pocket disparity between current men's and women's fashions, finding that on average women's pockets are about 5.6 inches shorter than men's and about 6.5 inches narrower. I found that to be quite interesting because it put it into numbers finally.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so we have one more question.
Yes.
Did this project make you mad? And if so, who are you mad at?
Excellent question. It made me quite frustrated at times. I had some wonderful coworkers here at the Galt that would send me links or come in to visit me in the back and show me that they have found a non-functional pocket or a faux pocket on someone's clothing, on some article that they read or some show that they watched, and it was quite frustrating to see just how long this problem has been here and how it has, as you mentioned earlier, devolved over time. It started out fantastic, and now we're at a point where pockets, it's still rare to find a functional one in women's fashion. So I certainly was getting quite frustrated throughout the research and through finding more and more of these faux pockets, and I don't think I have any one individual to direct anger towards there.
Right. Okay, we have another question. Another question is, how many pockets do you both have on your person right now?
So I have 4, just your typical 4 pants pockets, and fortunately for these jeans that I'm wearing, they are all functional. My only pair of jeans with 4 functional pockets.
Okay, and for myself, just thinking, I have my favorite sort of Levi's odds, so I have 5 pockets and all of them are functional.
Oh, okay.
That's great. So I guess we'll see if there are any more questions that sort of come from our audience, but I guess if you were to look towards the future, where do you see the future of pockets in women's clothing and fashion?
I'm hopeful in saying that I see it improving, and I see the pocket situation improving a bit more. The more that I talk with people and colleagues, I hear them talking about certain articles of clothing that they own that have the best pockets, and they're excited about having those pockets, and that always gives me hope and inspires hope that at least some brands are out there providing better pockets for women's garments. But unfortunately, as I mentioned, I've also noticed a revival in the fake pocket, where you go to put your hands in thinking you found a pocket and it's sewn shut. It's purely a decoration at that point.
Right.
So there's always a balance of I'm hoping it improves, but the reality is this is still quite an issue to work with.
So have you thought about going into the fashion industry yourself and helping to change this?
A very long time ago, and then I found something that I preferred far more.
Great. Kirstan, thank you so much for taking the time today to speak with me and to take questions from the audience. Pockets of Possibilities is on display at the Galt Museum and Archives. It is open to the public now and will run until February the 14th of 2021, and that is in our lower gallery. What we would recommend visitors do is to go online to galtmuseum.com and to book a time to come and to see this exhibition, as well as a number of our other special exhibitions and permanent collections. Again, thank you, Kirstan, so much.
Thank you. And if I may also add, there's an interactive component to Pockets of Possibilities, and we would encourage people to engage online, tag the Galt Museum, and tell us examples of your best pockets or your worst pockets, and show us how pockets have impacted you.
Great. All right. Thank you, Kirstan, and thank you, everybody. Enjoy your day.
Thank you so much.